if we're disconnected to anything in life, it's really easy to ignore it. So my feeling, and as Dr. Outdoors, of getting people to experience the nature and their planet and take pride in that and be aware. And can one single person change climate change? Maybe a little bit, but collectively, if we care enough, we can do something about it.
You are here for a reason, but navigating this human life can be challenging. How do you care for your body, mind, and spirit to make the most of your time here on Earth? How can you harness your incredible human potential? In this podcast, we explore these questions and more to help you craft your best life yet. Welcome to I Am Human. Hello, humans. I am your host, Dr. Yami, and I am so happy that you are here with me today. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. And if you love this show, please rate and review I Am Human on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. To be human means to have the privilege to explore nature and to be supported and nourished by nature. And to be human also means to age, but even as you age, to challenge yourself physically. Today on I Am Human, our guest is Dr. Melissa Sundermann. She is a double board certified physician in internal medicine and lifestyle medicine and has been practicing medicine for over 20 years. She also has training in integrative medicine through the University of Michigan and has completed a professional training program in mind-body medicine through the Center for Mind-Body Medicine based in Washington, D.C. Her 7 pillars of health include a whole food, plant slant dietary pattern, daily movement, restorative sleep, avoidance of risky behaviors such as tobacco, excessive alcohol, and drug use, stress management, social connection, and daily exposure to nature and fresh air. Dr. Sundermann is also known as Dr. Outdoors and chairs the Nature as Medicine subcommittee for the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. She does her best to practice what she preaches and enjoys running, biking, hiking, skiing, and spending time outdoors and creating adventures with her husband, 2 children, and 2 dogs. She is a 10-time Boston Marathon finisher, 3-time full Ironman triathlon finisher, and currently training for several upcoming ultra marathons. She truly believes that age is just a number and is passionate about spreading this word to all of her patients, family, and friends. Today on I Am Human, we're going to learn more about the power of nature. How much nature do you really need to support your immune system, your well-being, your mental health? And how do you expose yourself to nature? Those practical questions are things that we're going to discuss. We're also going to talk about climate change and how it's changing nature around us. We talk about Dr. Sundermann's athletic pursuits and her approach to aging and fitness. I know that you're going to love this episode and learn so much from it. Dr. Sundermann is such a passionate, enthusiastic, and delightful human. As you listen to today's episode, I want you to think about how you can spend more time out in nature and what outdoor activities you think that you might enjoy or like to try. Thank you, humans, for tuning in. Now for the episode. This podcast episode contains sensitive topics that may be triggering to certain people. Listener discretion is advised. Dr. Melissa Sundermann, welcome to I Am Human. It's such a pleasure to speak with you today.
Thank you so much for having me. I am thrilled to be your guest today.
Well, we're going to have a fun conversation because I don't think I've talked very much about nature on the show. So let's start there. Why are you so passionate about nature? And why is it such an important part of your life and your career?
Well, passionate about nature. I think this started in fact, I know it started a long time ago. And what's really fascinating is that my medical degree, I'm a DO, I'm a doctor of osteopathic medicine. And along the way, I have realized that DO also stands very importantly for Doctor Outdoors. So it's perfect. I was,
Love it.
yeah, the universe aligned, and I've really come into my Doctor Outdoors. I just know that throughout my life, I've just gravitated to being outdoors, and it's been just a very centering and grounding and a place where I really felt whole. And I've used nature and the healing benefits of nature throughout my life, whether that's going through, rigorous undergrad or medical school or family life. It's just something that I've been drawn to. And I always feel better when I'm around fresh air and nature. And so I started digging into the research, why I felt so good. And I found out that there's actual research that's been here for a long, long time. And I decided, you know what, I need to educate others about this. And so what really brought this to the forefront was about a year and a half ago at the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, their annual conference. I submitted an abstract proposal about, I wanted to talk to our, academy about the benefits of nature. And my proposal was accepted. It was pretty nerve-wracking because I came on the stage in front of 2,000 people immediately following Dr. Dean Ornish and Dr. T. Colin Campbell, which we know are luminaries to the lifestyle medicine field. And on walks, Dr. Outdoors. And I had such positive feedback that I said, okay, people want to know more about this. People want to know about nature prescribing. And so I went on to be the founding chair of the Nature as Medicine subcommittee for the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, where we bring in speakers from all over, actually the world, to educate other members of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine and therefore disseminate and have the ripple effect to bring this to our patients and the general population about all of the healing benefits of nature.
I love it. Well, I can just see the passion exuding off of you about this. But let's go back a little bit.
Yeah.
How were you exposed to nature and the outdoors? Did you have role models? Was your family really into it? Where did you grow up? Where did you grow up in a place that had abundant access to the outdoors?
Not really, Dr. Yami. My parents, we went cross country skiing. I think my mom, I love her to death. Absolutely. I think her idea of camping is probably going to a Holiday Inn. So it wasn't like, I didn't grow up as this hippie child. But I grew up in the 70s where we played outdoors. We would get on I had my Schwinn banana seat bicycle, and we'd ride all over our neighborhoods. We'd build tree forts. We'd catch fireflies. This is just how I grew up, and we got dirty, and so that was who I was. And as I went through college and made friends and met a boy, we started doing things that were really outdoorsy, and mountain biking and camping and hiking and exploring and getting equipment so that we could support these interests. And I just really felt like I had found my home. In fact, I joke, I say, my past life, I think I was a mountain goat, because anytime I'm around mountains, and I just feel it so at peace. So I've really incorporated these activities into my own life. My husband, we've been married for over 27 years. This is a big part of our relationship. Our children are now young adults. They're 22 and 24. We had them on skis as soon as they could walk. We've gone camping with them. We made it fun. We said, this is so fun. We don't have electricity. We don't have water. We have to go to a water pump. This is so fun. And they're like, yeah, they're like 2 and 4. They're like, yeah, it is. This is great. So we must have done a good job, because our kids graduated from university and they both moved to Denver, Colorado to be closer to nature in the mountains. So my friends, as we know, as being physicians, the people that we're around, we tend to have similar habits too, right? So that's one of your biggest predictors of your wellness and your health and wellness is who you're around. So my family, we are very active. We like to go outdoors. A lot of times when we can take a family vacation, we make it a point to, see and experience something amazing and beautiful in nature. So this past summer, when the kids had a little bit of time off work, we went to Arches and Canyonlands National Parks, and we spent the time just really exploring and getting all those benefits and seeing beautiful parts of the country. And then my friends, turns out my friends love nature too. There's probably self-selection bias, but so it's just really been a part of my life. I really aim. In fact, I'm sure I do get nature and fresh air every single day. Now, you might say, well, you must live in a place where that's just so conducive. And I live in Michigan and Massachusetts. And so my quote is, there's no bad weather, just inappropriate clothing. So you just have to, dress for the weather and get outdoors. And I guarantee you always feel better by just spending time outdoors.
Yeah, I agree with that as far as making sure that you have the right clothing and the right gear for your weather. So I grew up in Texas, which doesn't get that cold. And I remember having snow days. I'm putting this in virtual quotes when it was just basically ice outside because it didn't snow, and I thought that was so cool. Oh my gosh, ice, incredible, and now I live in the Pacific Northwest where Washington State, it's very much like Colorado and Utah and Oregon and those states where the culture is just very geared towards outdoors. There's just so many outdoor sports, so many places to hike and bike and rock climb and everything you can imagine is just like right there at our doorstep. But I grew up where I didn't get exposed to doing these kinds of activities. It wasn't part of my childhood. Now, similar to you, though, I'm a child of the 80s. But I remember spending all day outside on my bike. My parents had no clue where I was all day, going to the little stream, trying to get tadpoles and crawfish and all these things. And we raise our kids a little differently now. I think we do have a little bit more fear of our child just being out of the house all day long and us not knowing where they are. So I think culture has changed a little bit, but I think there is some benefit to letting kids just go out and explore and dig in the dirt and, wade around in the little creek and do all of those things. So I'm glad you brought that up because I think that's a good point as we start to think about how can we influence our children and make sure that we're role modeling these habits.
Absolutely.
Well,
and I think I'm going to come back to that about kids and nature. I think two things. One, I think as kids, we know we're innately connected to nature. It's just what we want to do, right? And as we get older through roles, responsibilities, technology, modern conveniences, we would get away from that. But I think as kids, we know, we are connected to these caterpillars and we want to save them and we want to rescue them and we want to find out more of them. And I think nature too, when kids are out in nature, and I know I was like this, you learn, resiliency and you learn risk assessment, right? It's just in the field kind of experimentation. If there's a log across a stream and as you're a kid, you're like, okay, can I get across the stream? Is that going to be wide enough? Is that going to be sturdy enough? And maybe you try it and, you get a foot wet because you stepped into the stream, but hopefully no major accidents or, repercussions. But I think that it can teach, very early on about, that's a beehive. Let's stay away from that. Just some of these experimentations that, I've raised kids. We had, find my iPhone. We still do. You worry about them. But I think there's some things that it's okay for kids to explore and then learn that wasn't such a good idea. But it is very different than when we grew up. I agree with that.
Oh, absolutely. And I agree. I think we should let our kids explore. I'll just say as a parent and a pediatrician, which I think pediatricians are like the most paranoid of all the doctors, because we've seen all the negative potential consequences. So in my mind, I'm thinking of worst case scenarios for every single thing my kids do. So I think it's good for them to be away from us too, because as parents, we can be overprotective. Well, let's get into a little bit more about the science. How does exposure to nature impact our health and well-being?
Yeah, so let's go back to the 1980s. So the science and the research started in Japan with Dr. King Lee, who was one of the primary investigators who started research into this. And he really started off with research into forest bathing, or in Japanese is Shinrin-yoku. And that's a term that maybe people have heard of, is Shinrin-yoku, forest bathing. And about 1982 in Japan, the reason why they were really looking into this is they thought, well, being in nature, forest bathing, Shinrin-yoku, probably can reduce stress. And so they were really forefront in their thinking of, let's see if we can reduce stress in our workers. So they, nowadays we have workplace well-being, chief wellness officers. Well, this is back in the early 80s that Japan was really forward thinking on this. So Dr. King Lee got a grant, and he did some of the first forest bathing studies in the world. And at first, he was looking at natural killer cell activity, which really is a marker of our immune system. And we know that if we have higher levels of natural killer cell activity, we're probably going to have lower risk of infection, maybe even lower incident rates of cancers. So some of the first experiments is he took people into the forest for 2 days and he measured their natural killer cell activity. And what they found was an increase from baseline. And so they thought, well, maybe it's just that they're leaving their homes and they're not having to wash dishes and do laundry and do homework and drive their kids around. So they took those same people to an urban environment and they measured the natural killer cell activity. And they really did not see that increase from baseline. So they thought, well, we're onto something. And what's really interesting is that when the subjects went back to their homes, they measured the natural killer cell activity at 1 week and at 1 month. And they found even at 1 week and 1 month out, they still had elevated levels of that immune system marker, the natural killer cell activities. So when I talk as Dr. Outdoors about why the nature pill, and I show actually a pill full of, trees and blue spaces, is the benefits is it's duration of action, right? As you know, as a pediatrician, and I'm a internal medicine specialist, is that most of the medications have to be taken daily or maybe twice daily, 3 times a day. So have a very short life. Very few medications are long acting. And so, nature, getting outdoors today could provide benefits to your immune system even 1 month out. And then of course, the cost of going outdoors a lot of times is absolutely free. If you can step outside and maybe you live in an area that's not conducive, but maybe you can go to schoolyards, to local parks, find some trails, and not have to pay money. And our pharmaceuticals, we know, the costs are exorbitant. And then, when we talk about side effects, medications these days, when you look at TV commercials, listen to TV commercials, or if you look at magazine articles, or you get your own prescription, you take that pamphlet and that super 2-point font of all the side effects, which, are mostly adverse side effects. And going outdoors, I say the effects are 99% positive. You might get stung by a bee sometimes. You might get some poison ivy if you're doing gardening. When I was working in the East Coast, we had to be aware of ticks, but really the benefits are great. So Dr. King Lee was really instrumental in starting this cascading of research to look into the nature benefits. And so then they did larger studies in Japan where they would go across, 12 different forests and look at cortisol levels and heart rate levels and blood pressure levels. And what they found was spending time outdoors in an urban environment. And you didn't have to be hiking up a mountain or, getting on a mountain bike and getting your heart rate up. Just being in the forest environments lowered our blood pressure, which is a good thing, lowered our heart rate, which is a good thing, and lowered our cortisol levels. And cortisol is, as we know, we need cortisol in our body. If you don't have enough cortisol, you end up in the ICU. But we don't want high levels of cortisol because that can promote inflammation. So just being outdoors can reduce level of cortisols. They've also done studies fairly recently in Finland when they looked at medication requirements. And what they found was spending time outdoors, that their participants required less medications involving asthma, blood pressure, and even mental health. We know that it's good for our mood. Being outdoors boosts our serotonin levels. So also some studies about green cover and tree canopies with decreased rate of hospitalizations for dementia, for Parkinson's. And a study recently came out looking at telomere length. So telomeres are those little shoestring, like the ends of the shoestring. And we know that lengthening telomeres can correlate to longer lifespan, and shortening the telomeres can correlate with shorter lifespan. So spending time around green spaces and tree canopy can actually increase telomere length. So some fascinating data that's coming out and more every day. And I try to keep on top of things as much as I can as Dr. Outdoors.
Yeah, and it's very complex too, because when you're in nature, you're also getting physical activity, right? You're usually walking around or doing something, even if it's not like you said, it doesn't have to be aggressive physical activity where you're out of breath and not feeling good, but also it can be meditative for a lot of people. A lot of people like that kind of walking meditation. And I know that there's definitely research on telomere length, and that's on the end of our DNA strands on meditation and how that can preserve and lengthen our telomeres as well. So it's like all of these cumulative effects of being out in nature. What about just, you talked about that, the mental health, but what about subjective well-being? Have they done studies to just rate, do people say they feel better subjectively after they're out in nature?
Yeah. So there was a study that came out just in 2022, I believe, that did exactly that. And it was pretty, I think it was 19,000 subjects that they polled to look at their subjective well-being scores. And they were measured over 7 days. So it wasn't a terribly long study. But what they found was people who spend more time outdoors had an overall perceived higher well-being score when they're looking at themselves. And I think it's important to know too of what is that nature dose. Now, as Dr. Outdoors, I would love it if I just lived in nature, but that's not really, we've got things called jobs and we've got things called family and I've got a couple dogs. And so what is that nature dose? And what the research has been consistent about is the nature dose is about 20 minutes per day or 120 minutes per week. So for some people, in this well-being, when they looked at it, some people who, Monday through Friday, it's working, it's driving kids around, it's really, really hectic. But then on the weekends, you have a little bit more time, is that you could even sort of get, an hour on Saturday or an hour on Sunday and still have the well-being effects from that. But really trying to hone in on 20 minutes per day. And just like when I'm counseling my patients about physical activity and our recommendations are 25 to 30 minutes per day. And I'm like, but you can break that up, right? You can break that up into segments. You can do the same thing with your nature exposure. And we are getting more and more research to suggest early morning sunlight is really important. And, even you living in the state of Washington where, that it can be sort of cloudy. It's like that in Michigan a lot too. That's okay. Because even though you feel like you're not getting a lot of sunlight exposure, you are. And so it's important to get outside probably before the hour of 9 a.m. You don't have to rise with the roosters, but get out before 9 a.m. without sunglasses. And you don't have to look up at the sky, but you will be absorbing that sunlight into your retinas, which goes into the suprachiasmatic chiasm. And what that does is that can increase our serotonin level, can decrease our cortisol level. It aligns our circadian rhythm. And we're learning more and more about we really need to align our circadian rhythm. And that means that we are awake when the sun is up and we settle down when the sun sets. And it also gets our melatonin cycle revved for the day. We want to build up our melatonin as we go throughout the day so that it peaks in the evening and helps us to fall asleep and stay asleep. So I tell people, try to get outdoors, in the morning if you can. If you've got a dog, go walk your dog, that's when I do my exercise. But if you, just sitting outside on your porch and journaling or having a cup of tea, just trying to get outdoors in the morning is really important.
I love that. And I just want to put a plug in for where I live. So I live in Yakima, Washington, which is actually east of the Cascades. So we have 300 days of sunshine per year here.
Wonderful.
Yeah. But we're also very high latitude. So this is the time of year that's hard for everybody because the sun doesn't rise till after 7 a.m. and it sets at 4.
Yeah.
So it's hard this time of year anyway, just because we're so high in latitude. But most of the year, we're so spoiled and lucky that we get nice, bright, beautiful,
wonderful,
clear days because it's a high desert.
Yeah.
And definitely that sun exposure. I talk to my patients about that, especially my teens. Because as we know, teens, their sleep rhythms kind of slip as, they get into those teen years. They used to think that it was just part of being a teenager. Now we're realizing that it probably has to do more with habits. So I think that's a lifestyle medicine thing that we can teach our teenagers as well, is that, if you're getting your early morning sun exposure, trying to keep your schedule consistent and not going to bed at 3 a.m. on Saturday, and Friday night, which they tend to do. So,
absolutely.
Okay. So this may be a silly question.
Okay.
But what counts as nature exposure? Can you just go outside? Because what if you live in New York City? Does just going outside count?
Yeah. I'm going to say yes, it does. And now when we are around green spaces, there's actually some really cool like things that go on. So anything that's green and living, trees, shrubs, plants, produce something called phytoncides. Phyton, Phyton, means plant, right? When we talk about yummy things to eat that are good for us, we talk about all the phytonutrients. So phytoncides, inside means cidal, means antibacterial. So anything that is green emits these organic volatile compounds. And the reason why they emit this is to protect them from getting ill. The trees want to flourish. The cool thing is that anytime we are around anything green that's living, we are inhaling these phytoncides and we get the benefits. So that Dr. King Lee that I spoke about, one of the early pioneers of forest bathing and all the research, he did a really cool experiment, very small. He had 12 subjects and they each got their own hotel room. And half of the rooms he rigged up to emit organic essential oils from this hinoki cypress trees, i.e. like emitting phytoncides. And then the other 6 subjects got owed to nothing. And after 3 nights, he took them out and he measured their natural killer cell activity. And the people who were inhaling those essential oils from the hinoki cypress trees actually had a 20% boost in their natural killer cell activity, and they felt more refreshed. So if I have a lot of patients, and especially when I was working in Massachusetts, from Boston, from Manhattan, that didn't have, a national park in their backyard like you do. And just going on tree-lined streets, parks, and that's why Central Park is there, and we've got the Boston Common. Even having houseplants. If you've got a balcony, put houseplants there. And let's say that, there's some people that, where you live is just not safe, right? So we have research to suggest listening to nature can benefit. And there is a study that looked at just 6-minute sound bites of listening to birdsong versus urban sirens, traffic. And we saw a decrease in anxiety and feelings of paranoia listening to birdsong, and unfortunately increased feelings of depression with those loud urban. So even trying to listen to birdsong can be wonderful. It can be if you open your window and it's natural, or maybe just listening to it, via virtual. And then there's, been some studies that have looked at viewing nature, like if you can't get outdoors, and a pretty famous study that looked at hospital patients, and this was done in the 80s, and it was patients that had their gallbladders removed, so post-cholecystectomy, and some of the patients they all had windows. Some of them looked out at trees and gardens, and other windows just basically faced a brick wall. And what they found were the patients that had these windows that had a view of nature required less pain medication, had shorter stays, and according to the nurse's notes, they were better well behaved. So this is all goodness of just, even if you can't be out in nature, having some virtual nature is wonderful. And then, we talk about green spaces a lot. Oh, I got my dog here. But also blue spaces are equally important. And there's not quite as much robust data and evidence about blue spaces, but blue spaces are equally important. When we talk about blue spaces, I'm talking about oceans and lakes and streams and ponds and waterfalls. And sometimes I have individuals that say, Dr. Outdoors, I'm all about water. And whenever I get near water and the rhythm and the sounds and the smells, I just feel at home. And absolutely, blue spaces plus green spaces, it's all good. Now, I will say that the research is not quite as robust for blue spaces as it is with green spaces. However, there are studies, and there's a study that I like to share that looked at, we talked about well-being and looking at midlife well-being, and what there was a correlation to blue space exposure as young children seems to correlate with improved well-being in midlife. So the take-home point is, if you have young kids, if you've got grandkids, you've got nieces, nephews, bring them to blue spaces when they're young. And I think you develop this feeling of safety and happiness and curiosity around those blue spaces. And then you probably tend to gravitate towards those blue spaces again as you're getting older.
Yeah. And everybody's personality and preferences are different, like I'm definitely not as much of an ocean person, but my happy place would be on a mountain in a cabin with the sounds of a river, a creek with that. I love that sound of it flowing and, bubbling and just the big tall trees. And I live in the desert, but I'm very close to that. So at least I can visit it. But also, I've been to beautiful desert places where even though you don't have these tall trees and you don't have the water right there, it also provides that sense of calmness and groundedness to be around that type of nature. So everybody has their different preferences. I think the point you're trying to make is just get out there, get in nature and get exposed. Now, one question I have, and this is what I was thinking about earlier when I was talking about culture. Culturally, I live in a place where there's a lot of people that love outdoor things, but there can also be the opposite. There can be some cultures that feel like you shouldn't be outside because you're going to get, harmed by the weather. Like it's too cold. When it's too cold, you're going to get sick. We've heard that one before, right? Or, you're going to get dirty or, you're going to get hurt. So what are the things that we can do to start helping those people, or if people have those ideas themselves, to get out in nature?
Yeah. So I think that's where, as healthcare providers of, doctors and nurses and physician extenders and psychologists and exercise physiologists, personal trainers, that we can start prescribing nature as a prescription so that we can break down those obstacles and barriers. And let's face it, we know that behavior change is really difficult. We are lifestyle medicine physicians. We are all about creating and maintaining and sustaining healthy lifestyle behaviors, but it's really hard. That's why 90% of New Year's resolutions last for, 1 month and then they go away. So I think it's really breaking down these obstacles and really trying to educate. The EPA did a study looking at Americans, and the average American spends 93% of their day indoors. So that's 87% inside buildings of our homes, our schools, our workplaces, stores, and then about 6% in automobiles and public transportation. So only about 7% of our day is spent outdoors. And this is not an all or nothing. You don't have to pitch a tent and live in a tent. This is just really trying to think about, did I get outdoors today? Did I get fresh air? And again, that 20 minutes per day, maybe 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the evening, trying to break down, obstacles of, my kids were in sports. And so if they had ballet class or a soccer game, okay, this is before they could drive. I'm going to go to their practice and I'll walk around the soccer field, or while they're at their ballet class, I'm going to go take a walk. So sort of what are some things that we can do? But I think as healthcare providers of really trying to instill this as a prescription, because we know, I told you about the health benefits, right? If we can lower your blood pressure, perhaps lower your blood pressure medication requirements, maybe even get you off medication, lower your stress level, get you to feel better, both physically and emotionally, that should be a prescription. So I think the more that we can make this accessible, right, and break down those myths, and you're not going to get sick. In fact, you're going to boost your immune system. Here's the research that shows that you're boosting your immune system when you get outdoors.
Yeah, I love that. And I think too is working on mindset, because it totally makes sense to me that the majority of us are going to be indoors, sedentary, because it's comfortable. And we want to avoid discomfort. And especially when the weather doesn't feel quite right, or it's too cold, or it's too hot, then you convince yourself it's not worth it. But I think talking to patients about how, you have to overcome that discomfort in order to feel the benefits of it. The discomfort's only temporary, especially I know in the winter, if you're wearing enough layers, you get the right clothes, you're cold for a little bit, but then you warm up once you start walking or snowshoeing and doing your thing. And then you're just like, man, it's beautiful out here. I hear the birds. I get to see other people. Sometimes you walk by and smile at them. You get those little points of connection, those micro connections. So there's just so many benefits, but you do have to kind of train your brain to say, okay, it's going to be uncomfortable for a little bit, but then I'm going to overcome it. And then I'm going to feel better afterwards.
Absolutely. And one of the exercises that I love to share, it's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And we, love to really share about the power of mindfulness and a mindful practice. And for some people, they're lifelong meditators. navigators. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm on this. And then for other individuals, that sounds really intimidating. Like no way can I sit there and think about nothing. So if we practice mindfulness and we incorporate nature in our five senses, it's a wonderful way to get all the benefits of nature and practice mindfulness. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, then what that means is step outside. And you can do this no matter what age you are. You can do this with your toddlers, right? So at first, only focus on 5 things you can see and really pay attention to what you're seeing. You're going to notice things. It could be in your backyard. In fact, I had a patient who was like, I did your exercise and I've lived in my house for 20 years and I never noticed this one statue that had always been there, right? So focusing maybe on cloud formation or just nature that's around you. So focusing on what you see and then shift to maybe 4 things you can hear and really pay attention to your hearing. Maybe it's different kind of bird song. Maybe it's the trees rustling in the wind. Maybe it's some rabbits hopping around. And then 4 things or 3 things you can touch and actually touch things, right? The curiosity as we get older, we're not grabbing things as much. So grab some leaves and feel how, rough the edges are, or bend down and touch moss on a rock and feel how spongy it is. And then hone in on 2 things you can smell. Like, what are you smelling? Are things in bloom? Is it just rained and you're smelling that after rain smell, which fun fact, it's called petrichor. So are you smelling the scent of petrichor? And then maybe one thing you can taste. I don't want Dr. Outdoors to be responsible for people eating anything poisonous, but that's just a really practical way to incorporate nature, your 5 senses, and practice mindfulness.
I love that. And that also gives you something to do in case you feel like you're going to get bored.
Right,
so
exactly.
Gives you some tasks to concentrate as you warm up outside. Mm-hmm. All right. I love that. Well, I kind of want to ask your opinion on climate change and how it's affecting nature in many ways, increasing natural disasters all over the world. And the other thing I thought of, when we talk about fresh air, but because of pollution, there's some places where the air isn't fresh. Yeah. So what are your thoughts about this harsh reality that we're facing in our world today?
Yeah, and that's just what it is. It's harsh reality. And my belief is the more that we connect with nature, because we as humans are nature, and E.O. Wilson and Eric Fromm, have this and introduced biophilia, and biophilia is the innate connection of all things living. And modern conveniences, it makes it very easy to not feel connected, So getting back to biophilia, and the more that we connect with nature, the more we're going to connect with our planet. And the more that we're going to want to take care of our planet. Living in Michigan and Massachusetts and you in Washington, the Canadian forest fires, right? I mean, we had effects in Michigan where the air quality was horrible. We were told not to go outside. I mean, that's how much climate change, is affecting. We're seeing increase in food prices because of the drought that's going on. In fact, in 2018, I think there was like a 20% increase in food prices across the country. From natural disasters, some people are losing their homeowners insurance because they're not going to underwrite it because of these natural disasters. Coral reefs are dying because of the, just 2-degree elevation in ocean temperatures can affect the acidity. And so coral reefs are dying. We have lakes that are drying up. So water supplies are becoming of concern. So this is a real big problem. And again, if we're disconnected to anything in life, it's really easy to ignore it. So my feeling, and as Dr. Outdoors, of getting people to experience the nature and their planet and take pride in that and be aware. And can one single person change climate change? Maybe a little bit, but collectively, if we care enough, we can do something about it.
I love that perspective. That's a beautiful way to see it. And I agree. And especially the difference between growing up in Texas and now living in Washington State, where there's so many advocates for the planet and for Earth because we just love it so much. And I've learned to love it so much that you want to take care of it and you want to protect it. But that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Well, let's shift gears a little bit. I want to talk about you and some of the perspectives you have on aging as well. So You are quite the athlete and you've accomplished a lot. So tell us a little bit about your athletic pursuits. When did you start doing endurance events and how has it impacted your life?
Well, let's see. Well, my first endurance event, I was a ballet dancer, like growing up, all throughout, elementary, middle, high school, even college. And when you talk about athletes, a lot of people don't think of dancers as athletes, and they are athletes. So I sort of tossed in my point shoes for a pair of running shoes in college. Just had some friends that said, "Hey, want to do a marathon?" And I said, "Sure, okay." I think Dr. Yami, you're probably similar. Those of us who went to medical school, I think we're goal oriented, and I'm like, "Sure, that's a goal. I'll do that." I learned that that's a very difficult thing to accomplish, but I did it. So I found that again, I'm so connected to the outdoors, and moving my body outdoors is something that's like religious to me. So I really just found joy in this, and it was just really wanting to try new things. And so I made it my goal after doing my first marathon was in 1996, I believe, in Chicago. And no, it was in 1992. And I was in medical school, and I heard about the Boston Marathon. And I heard that in 1996, it was going to be the 100th anniversary of the Boston Marathon. And I said, I think I want to do that. And then I learned, oh, you have to qualify for Boston. I said, well, okay, what does that entail? And so this was in second year of medical school. As we know, that it's a pretty busy time. So I worked really hard, and I had two other medical students that we decided that we were going to train together. And I was able to qualify for the Boston Marathon. So I did run the 100th marathon and in Boston. And this was in 1996. This was before cell phones. So I ran with a disposable camera, so I could take pictures along the way and have that experience. And I was born in Massachusetts, so I have a lot of relatives there. So I had a lot of family support. And the Boston Marathon is just an incredible experience. The entire city is out there on Patriots Day. They all have the day off work. So they're having fun while we're running 26.2 miles. And I was just, really smitten by that, and just the positivity of all those people, no matter, if you were the elite runners trying to win versus, hey, I just want to accomplish this and be a part of this celebratory event. It was just wonderful. And, I started mountain biking and, hiking and just again, like pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone. We know that, real growth happens when we get into that challenge zone. And there's so many analogies I make when I'm doing an endurance event of there's always usually a time I want to give up and quit. And I have this little talk with myself of like, you can stop. It's okay. Your family still will love you. Well, okay, well, why don't you try to get like to the next aid station? Don't give up yet, and all these things that you learn about yourself of like, keep moving forward, just one step at a time. Like, don't think about, the big thing of how many more miles of just like, hey, just try to get to the next aid station. Hey, try to get, a little bit further. And, in life, there's times that, life, I'm 53. There's been plenty of times in life that you feel like, I'm not tough enough for this. And then you say, okay, dig deep, don't give up, just keep moving forward, and you get through it. Right. So, it's been a blast. And so I'm training. Well, I will start training soon for my 11th Boston Marathon that I'll be doing in April. I'm doing it with some close friends of mine who help keep me motivated. And we're all in our 50s, and we're all professional women and moms. And so it's been just, they're my tribe. So we're going to have fun doing that. And I got into doing ultras, which is like 50 kilometers or 50 miles, a lot of trails. It's more of an adventure where, you just get out there and I don't care about my time. I just am out there to have fun. And I always meet really interesting people along the way. And you get a lot of time to tell your life story and to learn from others. So I love to ski. We get out to Colorado pretty much every year to go skiing. And our kids are into that sport now too, and better skiers than we are. So it's just really a part of my life. And I feel better when I move my body. Like I said, I'm in my mid 50s. So I think it's important to a certain amount of acceptance that there's things that my body won't tolerate anymore, and that's okay. And I'm slowing down, and that's okay. But I'm still getting out there and doing the best I can for myself. And it feels good. It feels good to move my body, and still continue to challenge myself.
Yeah, that's incredible. It's all about perspective though, right? Because
Yeah.
there's some people way younger than you that are never going to run a marathon, much less an ultra marathon. So it's hard because we can be hard on ourselves, but it seems like your inner voice is very kind and gentle. Has it always been like that? Or have there been times when your inner voice is more of a harsh critic when it comes to your athletic pursuits, your career, or anything else in life?
So that's a really interesting question. I think I'm really grateful that I had parents that raised me to believe that I could do anything. and when I said, I wanted to be a doctor when I was like 8 years old, and we didn't have even a single nurse in our family. No one came from any medical background. And instead of saying, you're a girl and we don't know any, we don't have any medical, they said, sure, go for it. And it just, from an early age, it kind of just made me feel like, well, if I want to do something, and I, of course, respect what that takes. I think that you don't want to like say, hey, I'm going to do this and not know the process. But really having a positive mindset. And that's not to say, that there's not an inner critic or insecurities that arise. But I think from early childhood of being instilled in me that pursue your dreams, and I'm going to say that, yeah, have I failed? Yeah, I have. And that's okay too. And when you look back, you think, well, rather than failing, that probably was a pathway I wasn't meant to take. And look at, how this evolved. And some of the best gifts in my life, I didn't plan out. They sort of were a pathway that I really didn't mean to go down, but I ended up going down. And just having perspective. And again, I'm in my 50s. And so there's storylines of my life that I wouldn't necessarily choose, but it happens, and it makes you more authentic, less judgmental. And especially as a primary care physician, I think that's really important to know that, we all have our struggles. That doesn't define us. And, some not so good things happen to good people, and that's okay too. So that's what I've really appreciated is the authenticity that comes with living a life.
Yeah, I love that you were talking about how whenever you do an event and you want to quit, you tell yourself, well, my family still love me if I don't finish this or if I quit now. And you acknowledge that, yes, it's the same, even bigger picture of like, am I enough? Even if I don't run a marathon ever, or even if I don't get my dream job, am I enough? Do I have that inherent worth? And the answer is yes. So just take all of these pursuits as fun and part of the experience. And sometimes we're going to fail and, whatever, we tried. Yeah. And sometimes we're going to achieve it. And it's all part of that fun exploration. Just like we were talking about nature as kids. When we're in nature as kids, it's fun exploration. We're not thinking about winning or losing or failing. We're thinking about just exploring and having fun, which I think we can learn a lot from kids in that way.
Yeah.
So is your next event the Boston Marathon then?
Probably the next big one. One thing I do want to share that I've really embraced is when you go to running events or probably other events, they have someone called a pacer. And a pacer is, let's say you're going to do a 5K. You've never done 5K before. You're like, I've been running like 11-minute miles, but what if I get nervous and I go out too fast? Well, a pacer will hold a sign and will keep that pace. And so I've been pacing groups distances anywhere from a 5K up to a marathon. Probably have been pacing for maybe, going on like 10 years now. I love it. Absolutely love it. I've used pacers along the way. And for me now, being a pacer, it's my time to give back. And, my Instagram handle is Motivator Melissa. And it just, when I'm out there and I can help others push beyond what they thought they could do, or give them the confidence, or give them that motivation, it is so worthwhile. And just, getting people to, whatever their finish line may be. Maybe it's like, hey, I'm going to start this race. I'm going to see how far I can go. Great. Or this is my first marathon, I just want to finish. Absolutely. And it's a really emotional experience. I paced a marathon in May, and then I paced another one this fall. And we had some incredible stories out there. You learn about what people this is their first time, doing something like this, or they made it this goal. They went through a really hard time in life or a health problem. And so they're out there, and I get emotional, and we cross the finish line, and I've got my people that I've been pacing with. I mean, the victory for them, and inspiring. So just to have that intimacy of human connection and human life. And when we're out there, I don't care, what your age is. I don't care what your background is. I don't care what your job is. I don't care we're out there as humans showing up, authentically, and just trying to be our best selves that day.
Yeah, I love that so much. Sometimes I'll just watch finish line cameras.
Yes.
I'm actually training for my very first half Ironman. So I will watch finish line cameras and just cry, because I'm like, it's just so beautiful when people are able to achieve that dream. And it's hard. It's really hard work. And you do it and you're like, I did this,
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about your approach to aging and fitness. How do you see it for yourself, but also for your patients?
So again, acceptance, right? And being in this age bracket of mid-50 female, menopause, perimenopause, things change. They just do. Hormones change and bodies change. And it's difficult, right? It's just like, oh, I've never really struggled with this part of my body. And now overnight I am. So it's really learning that that's okay, and balancing that you still got to do something, right? Acceptance, but not screw it, man. I'm just going to lay on the couch, So one of the things with aging that's really important is strength training, and resistance training. So personally, I love to just go outdoors and move my body. And strength training for me is like, well, do I really have to go back inside and do strength training? Whereas my husband's the opposite, loves to lift weights and things like that. And that being said, I know it's really important as we age, we lose muscle mass. It's called sarcopenia. That really happens as we go through menopause. And where I have been working at Canyon Ranch, we do DEXAs. So DEXA scans look at bone density, but also we would do body composition. So looking at total body fat, lean body mass, and then that visceral fat, which visceral fat is not subcutaneous. You can't see it. You can't pinch it or anything like that. It's the dangerous kind of fat that surrounds your organs. So body composition is always important. As we get older, it becomes more important. Elevated visceral fat is associated with increased risk of heart disease, insulin resistance, dementia, certain forms of cancer. So really important to be aware of your body composition. And the more that we can try to preserve or possibly even build lean body mass as we age is really, really important. Does this need to be crazy? Do you have to become a weightlifter? And no, but trying to get, 2 to 3 strength training intervals. And that could be using weights, free weights, but that also can be using your own body weight. So doing planks. I love to do planks. I, went online and, looked at a plank series, and it's helped me. I put my earbuds in and just do a plank series and some squats and some lunges, and you can use bands and TRX, something that I think with behavior change and getting habits, it's something that you feel confident you can do. So for me, it's like, okay, I can do 15 minutes and it doesn't have to be crazy. I mean, yeah, it might be better if I did more, but 15 minutes is something I knew I could do. And really trying to embrace that. And it's just so important when we look at lean body mass for bone density, for decreasing risk of falls as we age, and you fall and you break a hip, like I've been a hospitalist. We see where that goes, right? The immobility and sedentary, and you get a blood clot, you develop a pneumonia. It's just going to be a cascading effect. So again, take home point is going to be accept, that you're getting older and your body might look different. It might feel different. And there are some things that we can do to mitigate, health risks that are associated with that. But it does take effort and it takes healthy habits, and you have to choose something that is sustainable, right? And when people ask me, doctor, what's the best form of exercise for me? And I say, well, what do you like to do? I have fallen in love with pickleball. Love it. Love it. And I'm like, then that's the best form of exercise for you because you enjoy it and you're going to keep doing it. Other people are really into bird watching and they've got their Merlin app and they love to go outside. And I said, keep doing that. Every time you're bird watching, you're walking in the woods and you're getting movement. So I think it's finding something that you enjoy doing, perhaps getting accountability partners. For me, that really helps is like, hey, you want to meet for a run tomorrow? And I might wake up and feel like, but I've got someone meeting me, right? So I think trying to find ways to make your level and your success rate higher.
Yes, totally agree. And I will say, yes, we have to accept that our bodies change, even just day to day. Like, I might be able to lift a certain amount today, but tomorrow I might have fatigue and not be able to lift that much. So I think acceptance is really important to be realistic. But I really feel that the majority of people underestimate how much they can do. And they use aging as an obstacle to say, I'm too old for that. I can't do that anymore. Where really probably most people can do way more than they think they can. They just have to believe that they can and then just start taking the steps to adequately do whatever that they need to do to get there. But that age is not necessarily a barrier to still pursuing some of these goals you have in your life. It may just, you're probably not going to finish number 1 or in the top 10, but you can do those things. You can still go do those things. So,
and I like to say anything is better than nothing, right?
Yes.
And when we look at brain health and cognitive abilities, what's so exciting is, for years, decades as a primary care physician, I was seeing Alzheimer's dementia quite often. We still, it's increasing rates, but we didn't know much about it. We didn't know what we could do to prevent it. And we didn't have medications that really did anything. And now learning about lifestyle behaviors and their interconnection with our cognition. And when we talk about physical activity, I mean, holy cow, moving your body at that moderate intensity up to 5 times per week, about 30 minutes per day can lower your risk of Alzheimer's dementia by 40%. That's huge, right? If there was a pill that reduced your risk of dementia by 40%, holy cow, everyone would be on it. So I think it's knowing why this is important. It's not just about a number on the scale or, popping muscles. It's like, these are the reasons you're investing today, for the future, right? And getting people to understand that. And guess what? It feels good. And so I tell people, again, break down your barriers. Or if you want to do exercise in the morning, lay out your clothes, maybe even sleep in them. There's times that I've slept in my running clothes so that I knew I got up and I just closed the door. Right? So make sure that you don't have barriers. And I say one of the hardest exercises at the gym is opening the front door and walking in, right? Once you get started, or I said to people, if you're going out for a walk or a jog or ride your bike, tell yourself you'll do it for 2 minutes. I can do it for 2 minutes. Guess what? Pretty much you're going to keep going once you get through those first couple of minutes because it feels good and you're never going to regret it when you're done. You always feel better.
Yeah, it's a win-win-win. What do you wish more people knew?
I wish more people knew that 1% better is enough, right? And I wish more people knew, and we're both, lifestyle medicine, that more people knew that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? Ben Franklin's quote from so long ago. And it is so true. And, so much of today's talk about longevity. Well, we're about, yes, you want to live longer, but I want you to increase your well span, your quality of life, your vitality. And that doesn't have to be perfection, right? It's progress, not perfection. And I keep saying to my patients, 1% better. So if you're not eating a single fruit or vegetable, see if you can eat one. If you're not, everyone has smartwatches or smartphones. And so if you're only getting 1,000 steps per day because you have a remote job, or see if you can get 2,000. If you're not sleeping well and you're, we talked about circadian rhythms, you're staying up until 2 a.m, see if you can, shift that needle and try to get in bed an hour earlier or wake up an hour earlier. Try to aim to get 6.5 to 7 hours of sleep. If you're with stress management, if you haven't dabbled into deep breathing, try to do 10 deep breaths each day, just little by little. We know that there's a huge role of social connection. And studies now showing that loneliness and social isolation increases our risk of mortality and dementia. So finding someone you could, talk to or go for a walk with, getting outdoors. So these small incremental changes can really add up, and being honest with yourself about what do you think you can do. It's not about everyone else, right? Everyone else might be, doing things this way. And you say, well, hey, I think I could do a smoothie. I think I could do that. Yeah, I think I could, walk to get my mail, or, finding out something that you can do and you're going to feel good about accomplishing that, rather than having these huge goals that you're not able to obtain because they're not relatable. And using, we have the SMART acronym for creating behavior change. So I just wish more people knew that, you can move the needle, and any way that you move that needle is going to benefit you.
Yeah, that's such great advice. Start from where you're at and go from there, and just take baby steps, because that's all you need to continuously get better. Well, what does it mean to be human?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a small question there. So what does it mean to be human? I see humankind as being like this infinite potential, and it's our physical bodies and our mental bodies and our spiritual bodies and our energetic properties that all exist and are interconnected. And as we've talked about nature so much, it really is that, we're all interconnected. And in fact, if you look at our own, what we think as humankind, and let's just talk about the gut microbiome for 1 second, right? We've got 38 trillion organisms, bacteria, viruses, fungi living within us. So to be human is, I think, accepting that we are a living creature among so many other living creatures amongst us. And to know that, yeah, our potential and our connection is ultimately really, really important.
Wow, that's amazing. I love it. I love how you took it to the macro and then brought it to the micro and then back out again. So very beautiful, very beautiful. Well, Dr. Melissa, this has been fantastic. What a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for bringing us your passion, your enthusiasm, and your motivation. I appreciate that so much. How can we connect with you, and what products and services do you offer?
So on Instagram, I actually have 2 handles. I know it's a little bit confusing, a little bit more work for me, but I'm at my Instagram handles are at Motivator Melissa, and also at the Doctor Outdoors. I'm also very active on LinkedIn, and you can just put in my name, Melissa Sundermann. And that's where you'll find where I'll do a lot of articles about nature's medicine and lifestyle medicine. So I'm really active on, I'm on Facebook as well. And then as far as products, I am really proud of a collaboration I have done with one of my lifestyle medicine colleagues, Dr. Robin Tiger. You may know her as Stress-Free MD. So Robin, original board certifications in diagnostic radiology, but she's also lifestyle medicine board certified and has done all of this training in mindfulness and meditation and yoga, trauma informed. And so we came up with a program called Revive. And Revive is really a health and well-being group coaching model that we started with other physicians, because we felt like even though physicians know how to take care of other people, they don't know how to take care of themselves. And so it's grounded in the evidence-based pillars of lifestyle medicine. And the great thing about Revive is now we are going to be growing it so it's that we can serve the general population. And we do both didactic parts of going through the pillars of lifestyle medicine as well as experiential. So actually learning the how. We wanted to teach you the what and why, but also the how. So Revive. And if you want to learn more about our Revive program, you would go to www.stressfreemd.net Revive, and you can learn more about our program. So that's really exciting, and we are growing and going to expand that program.
I love that. You're doing such wonderful work. So I really appreciate everything that you're doing and all, like I said, the passion and energy that you bring to this work. So thank you, Dr. Melissa Sundermann, so much for being a guest on I Am Human.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Yami. And I am Dr. Outdoors, and I am human.
Thank you for listening to another episode of I Am Human. I would be so honored if you subscribe to the podcast so that you never miss an episode. We love our listeners and take your feedback seriously. If you have questions or constructive feedback, you can email us at podcast@dryami.com. That's podcast@doctoryami.com. I am your host, Dr. Yami Cazorla-Lancaster. I Am Human is produced by myself and Alejandra Parra. Graphics designed by Alejandra Parra. Music by Angela Soph with Glowbox Productions and edited by the Castos production team. Remember, human, you are here for a reason. Have fun, explore, and live your life to the fullest.